Welcome to World Code Updates, your daily briefing on everything happening around the world. Manila, Philippines, August 2025. The city pulses with life, but beneath the surface, tension is mounting. The South China Sea, just beyond the horizon, is once again the center of global attention. News just broke. Early this morning, a Philippine Coast Guard patrol faced off with 3 Chinese research vessels, each one guarded by a much larger Chinese cutter, near the contested waters of Reed Bank. The standoff was tense, with both sides refusing to back down. The Chinese ships weren't simply passing through, they were stationary, their equipment deployed, mapping the seabed deep within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, waters internationally recognized as belonging to the Philippines. The Philippine crew, voices steady but urgent, demanded the Chinese vessels leave immediately, asserting their nation's rights over these waters. The Chinese, however, stood their ground, insisting they were operating within what they claim as Chinese territory, their national flag flying defiantly in the wind. This isn't an isolated incident, it's the latest in a long series of escalating confrontations between the two nations, each encounter more fraught than the last. But this one feels different, more deliberate, more calculated. It's a move in a high-stakes game where every action is scrutinized by the world. For local fishermen, these confrontations are not just headlines, they're a direct threat to their livelihood. Each day they risk their safety to provide for their families, uncertain if they'll be chased away or worse. For Manila, this is more than a maritime dispute. It's a test of sovereignty, a challenge to the nation's authority and its ability to protect its people and resources. For the world, it's a dangerous escalation, one that could ignite a larger conflict, drawing in regional powers and threatening global stability. Both sides are holding their ground, neither willing to yield. The world watches, breath held, as this remote spot in the sea becomes a global flashpoint, its outcome uncertain. Reed Bank isn't just about a few ships or a patch of ocean. It's about power, history, and the future of the global order. The stakes here are enormous. The area is believed to hold significant natural gas reserves, resources vital for the Philippines' energy security and economic future. Control over these waters means control over energy, jobs, and national development. China's presence is seen as a clear assertion of control over resources that, under international law, belong to the Philippines. It's a bold move, challenging the rules-based order. This standoff is a microcosm of the entire South China Sea dispute, historical claims clashing with modern law, national pride colliding with economic need, and old rivalries resurfacing in new forms. The outcome here will shape the 21st century, defining global trade routes, international relations, and the balance of power in Asia and beyond. Tonight, we'll untangle what's really at stake in these contested waters, exploring the stories behind the headlines and the people caught in the crossfire. We'll examine the competing claims, the legal battles waged in international courts, and the confrontations playing out on the waves. This is more than a regional squabble. It's a test of international law, diplomacy, and the willingness of nations to defend their interests. The drama at Reed Bank is just the opening scene in a much larger, consequential story, one that could shape the future of the region for generations. To truly understand what's unfolding, we need to look at every angle, every perspective. Let's dive in and uncover the truth behind the flashpoint at Reed Bank. Why does the South China Sea matter so much? What makes this stretch of water so crucial that nations are willing to risk conflict over it? It's the lifeblood of the global economy, a maritime highway connecting east and west, north and south. 1/3 of all maritime shipping, over $5 trillion in trade, passes through these waters each year. From crude oil and natural gas to electronics and clothing, goods from every continent flow through this vital corridor. Disruption here would send shockwaves through global supply chains, affecting everything from electronics to food. Even a brief blockage could cause shortages, price spikes, and economic turmoil worldwide. Beneath the waves lie vast reserves, 11 billion barrels of oil, 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. These resources are a magnet for energy-hungry nations, fueling competition and hope for future prosperity. For regional economies, these resources mean energy independence and prosperity. Access to them can transform cities, create jobs, and reduce reliance on foreign imports. The sea is also a vital fishing ground, providing over 10% of the world's fish catch and supporting millions of livelihoods. For countless coastal communities, the South China Sea is their pantry and their paycheck. But overfishing and territorial disputes are devastating the ecosystem, and fueling dangerous clashes. The balance between economic gain and environmental protection grows more fragile each year. Geography makes this sea a strategic prize. Whoever controls these waters controls the crossroads of Asia. Control means projecting power, monitoring traffic, and denying access to rivals. It's about influence, security, and shaping the future of the region. For the US and its allies, freedom of navigation is non-negotiable. They insist that these waters remain open to all, resisting any attempt to close them off. For China, control is central to its security and ambitions. It sees the sea as a shield, a resource, and a symbol of its growing power. The South China Sea is a geopolitical chessboard. Every move scrutinized, every misstep risky. Diplomacy, strategy, and military might all collide here. The stakes are economic, environmental, and military. What happens here ripples across the globe, touching lives far beyond these shores. This is why the world cares. The fate of the South China Sea is tied to the fate of the world economy, security, and the environment. The next move could change everything. In this high-stakes game, the world is watching and waiting. At the heart of the dispute is a complex web of overlapping claims. 6 governments, China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan, each claim sovereignty over islands, reefs, and rocks, many barely visible at high tide. China's 9-line claim covers nearly the entire sea, clashing with the internationally recognized zones of its neighbors. Vietnam cites centuries of administration over the Paracels and Spratlys. The Philippines relies on geography and international law, focusing on features within its 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. Malaysia and Brunei claim features within their own EEZs. Taiwan's claim mirrors China's, despite being a rival. These overlapping claims make negotiation a complex multi-party affair. Every side has its own history, maps, and legal arguments. Finding a simple solution is nearly impossible. To understand today's conflict, look back centuries. The South China Sea was once a shared highway for trade and culture, not a territory to be owned. Ancient empires focused on controlling trade routes, not claiming vast swaths of ocean. The arrival of European colonial powers changed everything, introducing fixed borders and exclusive sovereignty. After World War II, newly independent nations inherited these concepts, applying them to the sea. Old maps and colonial documents became tools for modern claims. The shift from a shared sea to a divided one sowed the seeds of today's disputes. History's legacy still shapes every confrontation. Each country justifies its claim with a mix of history, maps, and law. China points to ancient texts and the 9-line as proof of historic rights. Vietnam counters with its own centuries-old records of administration. The Philippines leans on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, arguing for rights within its EEZ. UNCLOS was meant to clarify maritime entitlements, but its provisions on islands and history are open to interpretation. China insists its historic rights survive UNCLOS. Others say only modern law matters. This clash, history versus treaty, keeps the dispute unresolved. The question, which should prevail? In 2013, the Philippines made a bold move by taking China to court under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. Their goal was to seek international clarity on the legality of China's sweeping 9-line claim, which covers vast areas of the South China Sea and overlaps with the Philippines' own maritime zones. Despite China's refusal to participate or recognize the proceedings, the case moved forward at The Hague, with a special tribunal convened to hear the arguments and evidence. In 2016, after years of deliberation, the tribunal delivered a historic ruling. China's claim to historic rights within the 9-line had no legal foundation, and none of the Spratly features qualified as true islands capable of generating an exclusive economic zone, or EEZ. The decision also condemned China's interference with Philippine sovereign rights, especially its construction of artificial islands and militarization in disputed waters. On paper, it was a landmark victory for international law and for smaller nations seeking justice through global institutions. However, China outright rejected the ruling, dismissing it as invalid, and instead doubled down on its activities in the region, continuing its island building and military patrols. The tribunal, lacking any enforcement power, could only issue its judgment without the means to compel compliance. While the legal victory clarified the rules of the sea, it did little to change the tense and sometimes dangerous realities on the water, where rival ships and fishermen still clash. The gap between what international law says and what powerful nations do remains wide and troubling. The world witnessed the limits of international justice. Despite the ruling, the conflict in the South China Sea endures, with no easy resolution in sight. Legal battles are one thing, reality on the water is another. The South China Sea is a stage for dangerous confrontations, coast guards, navies, and even fishing boats. The 2012 Scarborough Shoal standoff saw China seize control after a tense face-off with the Philippines. China's maritime militias, civilian boats backed by the state, swarmed disputed areas, intimidating rivals. In 2014, China's oil rig near Vietnam triggered weeks of collisions and protests. The U.S. Navy conducts freedom of navigation operations, challenging China's claims and risking close encounters. Every maneuver carries the risk of miscalculation. The line between peace and conflict is razor thin. One wrong move could spark a crisis. Amid tensions, diplomacy continues behind the scenes. ASEAN and China have spent decades negotiating a code of conduct for the South China Sea, but progress is slow. Disagreements persist over whether the code should be binding and what activities it should cover. Bilateral talks and back-channel negotiations try to manage day-to-day crises and prevent escalation. Southeast Asian nations balance defending their rights with maintaining economic ties to China. Quiet diplomacy establishes hotlines, fishing agreements, and joint development projects. These efforts don't solve the core dispute, but they help keep the peace. The diplomatic dance is slow, but essential. Without it, the risk of open conflict would be far greater. The South China Sea dispute is a global issue. Instability here threatens worldwide trade, raising costs and causing shortages everywhere. The conflict tests the international rules-based order. Will disputes be settled by law or by force? China's rejection of the 2016 ruling challenges the system the world relies on. The US and its allies see themselves as defenders of free navigation. China sees foreign interference. This great power rivalry raises the stakes, risking escalation from local incident to superpower crisis. The outcome will shape the future, will law, or might decide the world's fate. The balance of power in Asia, and beyond, is at stake. The world is watching, because what happens here matters everywhere. The need for peaceful resolution has never been greater.